Welcome to another episode of the Empowered Half Hour. I say this every episode, but I am so excited to bring to you today's guest, my friend Dale from the other side of the world. I'm going to let him introduce himself, but I wanted to share that I was on his podcast, Talking Wealth, about a month or so ago, and we got really chummy during the interview, and I thought it would be great to bring Dale on the Empowered Half Hour. So, Dale, I would love for you to tell the listeners a little bit about yourself.
Oh, that's easy because I think I can talk about that for hours, couldn't I? My background is, this is where a lot of people, because of who I am today, I'm a boutique fund manager. We manage tens of millions of dollars that I'm in charge of. We also run a government accredited education facility. So we teach people about the stock market, and we're approved by the Financial Planning Association here, our SEC, etc. So people see me as that and they go, oh, it's all right for you, you're successful and blah, blah, blah. But they don't really know my backstory. And a lot of people don't know my father died when I was 3 months old. So my mother had 3 children under 5 and I was the youngest and she had to bring us up. And so I didn't have new things all my life. So it was always, we were on government welfare. The government paid for my schooling. The government paid for my mum to look after us for that period of time until I started to get out to work. And I'd say to people, I didn't get my first bicycle, brand new bicycle, till I was 30 years old, until I bought it myself. Wow. So if I wanted to fix my bicycle, I'd find old parts somewhere and clean them up and then put them all together and build a new bicycle. Or I'd go and deliver newspapers so I could buy a cricket bat or a new skateboard, or I'd do work at the local football games and sell drinks and pies and hot dogs and all of those sort of things, so I could get in and watch the game and make some money so I could buy little things that I wanted and not take it away from my mother.
Yeah, I love that you shared that, and I do want to hear more of your story too if you want to share more. But there's a misconception that when someone becomes successful that perhaps they were like handed that, or that they were really lucky. And I love that you talk back to, hey, you weren't dealt the easiest hand, and you had to find creative ways to get the things that you wanted. And I did too. You've heard a little bit about my background, but I have found as I've done this podcast and I get into the backstories of people, I have found that character trait in the ones that have reached the level of success that they feel is their success, that there's that grit, there's a resilience, there's that character of commitment, and I'm just going to find a way. So I love that you shared that, because I always say, like, listeners, if you have that, those natural qualities, keep going, because you don't know where you could go. But Dale, back to you.
No, you are right. To me, it was always, everything's about attitude and belief in yourself. And that's one thing that people say to me, how did I become successful? It's because of my mother, because of the beliefs she instilled in me about just giving it my best all the time. And it doesn't matter if you try and fail, just keep going, don't stop. And my mother always took on little extra jobs and all little things to try and get those little niceties for us so that we could buy a Coke on a Saturday and some lollies so that we could sit down as a family and just have a little bit of not a celebration, but like a nice little thing as a family. And she would do these things and walk around the streets delivering pamphlets, cleaning people's houses. And I got that whole attitude from my mum. What happens doesn't matter. It's how you handle it that does matter. So you can either take a situation positive or negative. You can either be optimistic or pessimistic. I just learned to be optimistic. And to me, got the right attitude, anything's possible. And I'll tell you, I'm a 2-time author, right? My first book, bestseller. My second book's won awards. My second book, Accelerate Your Wealth, is in the US. My first book is Australian only. But when I did year 12, so that was the end of high school for us, just before university, I went to a trade school up to year 11, and year 12 I had to go to a vocational school to get my year 12 so I could get university entrance. And in English, they did a test for spelling and they did a test for grammar, like written stuff. I failed both of them miserably. Like I got 3 out of 30 on a year 9 spelling test.
Oh,
so
wow.
I couldn't spell, I couldn't write very well, and yet I'm a 2-time author and best-selling author. So anything's possible. I dumped out of university. I only stayed there for about 3 months. but I am a responsible manager for a financial services license without a degree.
I didn't know that about you. I also did not complete university. I dropped out twice because I started making more money than the degrees I was going for. So I was like, okay, maybe
That
I'll just
was
put that
me.
on pause.
Yeah, I said I can make more. A university degree wasn't going to get me where I wanted to go, but all the time, all my youth, I always knew with absolutely unwavering confidence that I knew I would be a millionaire and I knew I would be successful. I just didn't know how to
Oof.
do that yet. And I just had to learn how to do that. And when I was sort of about 18, 19, I found some mentors and they said to me, Dale, whatever you do when you're with somebody who's where you want to be, just shut the F up. That's what they said. Listen and they will teach you. And if you want to be somewhere, find somebody who's the best of that, go and talk to them and then do whatever they tell you to do. So, and that's what I did. And today's the proof of where you can go if you just use your mouth less and use your ears a
Yeah.
hell of more.
There's so much wisdom in what you said. And the first thing I want to address is I want to just acknowledge you honoring the beliefs from your mother. I think that maybe it's just the world I live in because I do a lot of self help and stuff, but I hear a lot of people, they carry the grief from their parents, right? Like, oh, they scarred me, the trauma. But there's also that side of the wisdom that we got. And for me, that was my grandma. My grandma she grew up on a farm. She was one of 5 children, but she hustled and created this beautiful life for herself. And she always called me Becca Ann, but she'd be like, Becca Ann, excuse this, but she's like, you can wish in one hand and shit in the other and see which one fills up faster. And she's like, the reason I tell you that, because I've always been an avid dreamer. She's like, I want you to know that you can dream, but you have to work. Dream and work. And that like stayed with me my entire life till now. I'm like, okay, I dream and then I work.
You're right. And when I was in my sort of teens and early 20s, I had people coming to me saying being successful is about working smarter. And after a few years, I realized that they were absolutely 100% wrong. Because being smart doesn't make you successful, because otherwise
Yeah.
people with PhDs and things like that would be super successful and have lots of money. But it's about smart and hard. So dream, and to me, is have the ideas, but then you've got to put it in action. And I think Steve Jobs sort of said it, and I can't remember the exact phrase, but you can have all these ideas in the world, but unless you're willing to put the work in, it doesn't make any difference. They're not going to go anywhere anyway.
Yeah,
So
I
to
love
me,
that.
entrepreneurs, we come up with lots of ideas. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've done a few. I've got 3 or 4 businesses at the moment,
It's
but it's
awesome.
great when people come to you with these ideas. I go, great, that's a really good idea. So now, who's going to drive the idea? And they go, I don't know. And I went, well, okay, it's a great idea, but who's going to drive it? You're expecting me to drive that for you. To me, it's about having that passion and that drive. So do what you believe in, do what you're passionate about, and you just put the effort in, and you'll be successful. But I think the biggest thing that I learned from my mentors is never give up. Doesn't matter what's going on. You could have the shit sandwich delivered to you, but just keep going, because you're going to fail,
Yes.
and you're going to fail a lot. And I reckon I've failed more than most people, and that's why I'm more successful than most people, because I've been bankrupted. I've lost businesses. Had my first wife left me, and I had no money and had all this debt and no money. And I've
Wow.
built things up numerous times. But again, it's like my mum said, doesn't matter what happens, Dale. How you handle it that does. What attitude do you have towards happening? You can either take it a positive way or a negative way. You can choose to wallow, or you can choose to go through it. And I choose not to have pity parties, basically. What do I do next?
I absolutely love that. And it is just a testament of like what happens when you don't give up, but acknowledging that failure is a part of the process. A lot of people struggle with perfectionism. And so there's the failure to start or failure to thrive once they start, like you were saying. And since I've spoke to you last, I'm so excited. I got a publishing contract for my next book. So no more self-published. I have a traditional publisher. I'm so excited. But I had a lot of people ask me, like, how did you do that? Did you look into that? Kind of going back to what we were talking before. And I was like, no, I had many rejections. I got told, like, you need to go back. Maybe you should just write a different book, like a lot of things. And if I got discouraged at my first failure, I would never be able to see my dreams come true. And so much more of my journey to go. But I think why I wanted to call that out is that it's a very important part of the success journey. And so for the listeners, we do have a lot of high achievers, a lot of leaders that are even wanting to be thought leaders to inspire other people. And I think that it's important to incorporate failure into the message.
Oh, look, it is because, and I'll tell you a story. One of my mentors, he told me a story about Jack Cranfield, Chicken Soup for the Soul. Chicken Soup for the Soul, he was rejected hundreds of times for his book, and yet they're one of the most successful book series out there. And my mentor was telling me one day he was sitting on a park bench, not far from where I am right today, because he used to bring speakers in like Zig Ziglar, James Rohn, Tom Hopkins,
Awesome.
Earl Nightingale. They were all his friends, and this was my mentor. Sadly, he passed away a couple of years ago. I was with him one day and he's talking about this one day with Jack Cranfield sitting on a bench, and he was talking about what he would call his book and before he wrote the first book and all the challenges that he'd had. And they were having that real sort of what he called an unreasonable friend type conversation. And what that meant is you tell somebody what they need to hear, but you do that with love and knowing what the goal that they want. So it's like, I want to write a book. Okay, so what's the first step, Becca? Okay, now what do we do, Becca? Are you doing it? I'll ring you tomorrow and make sure you've done that type of thing. And I might drive you crazy, but you're going to get what you want. But don't tell me you want it unless you're really serious about it. Because if it's just a wish, then we don't need to do that. If it's something you desire and you truly desire, then I'm happy to work with you and push you and keep asking you, keep you accountable. And he was like that with me. And I was just lucky enough in the end of his days that he treated me as a mentor in his financial side of things, because that's sort of my expertise. And that was the ultimate compliment to me, that my mentor who'd helped me for 30 years was just so open. And he introduced me personally to Zig Ziglar at a function.
I'm so jealous now.
And I just like, that was just the most amazing day of my life. Zig Ziglar and Tom Hopkins and a few others. I think James Rohn was here. And I'd had my lunch in this VIP room, and I didn't know my mentor was there. And I was just looking around while sort of at the end of the lunch, and my mentor was sitting on a table and he waved at me. And then he says, come on over, come on over. And so I walked over, and on the table was Zig Ziglar and his wife and Tom Hopkins. So, and I got to meet Zig Ziglar personally and had a beautiful day and got a copy of his book and it was signed. And that's one of my biggest memories, you know, because I love Zig Ziglar books and his messages that he pushes out. And I suggest anybody read Zig Ziglar's books. And also
Absolutely.
Ogman is one of my favorite authors too.
Yes, I have. I've read The Greatest Salesman in the World, and I have it right there on my bookshelf, but I don't want to turn around. The latter one.
Yeah, The Return of the Rag Picker. There's just so
many. So many. I love Ogman. Well, I would love for you to share a little bit about wealth mindset. And particularly, I always like, what did you have to overcome? But maybe if you want to share maybe what you had to overcome, what you have. So maybe if you want to put a little bit more into that, I'll open it up. But I also, wealth, as you know, is some of the biggest blocks for people. So what would be, outside of maybe if you do want to share a little bit more of your story, also, I would love maybe a word of advice for the listeners of how they might be able to overcome wealth blocks as well.
Really good question, because I know, and again, I have to go back to my mother. We didn't have money, but there's a vast difference between broke and poor.
Yes.
Broke is just the absence of having cash or money. Poor is a mental state of mind. So whilst we had no money as I was growing up, I never once in my life have ever felt poor. Because to me, poor, that mentality means you run from a scarcity mentality, that there's not enough, there's never enough. So what people do under that mentality is they tend to buy things to give themselves pleasure, like a new lounge suite or maybe chocolate, or it could be something like that, if you know what I mean. And that's what they're actually doing. And to me, that's not what they should be doing. So being broke is temporary. Poor is a state of mind. And to me, being broke's not scary. And I've always said that to people. Some people say to me, well, what happened if you lose all your money? And I'd say, well, just get it all back again. Because it's here that does the work. It's here that does all those dreams. And here's that does all of those actions to make sure that you are being successful. And that's what it's all about. So to me, if somebody is in that scarcity mentality, in that poor state of mind, it is easy to get out of it because there's money everywhere and there's opportunity everywhere. You just have to open yourself up to the opportunities and grab them. But you've also got to be, when I was younger, I learnt a statement or a saying basically, and it was, I will do today what others won't so I can play tomorrow where others can't. Ooh. And I learnt that when I was about 19 and I had a mentor at the time. I had a few mentors, and I was just so lucky to have a few mentors. I'm naturally
Me
an
too.
introvert. That's my natural state. And I was always like that. But these people would just grab hold of my hand and go, Dale, you need to meet that person. And, or Dale, you need to meet that person. And so they looked after me because they could see my passion, they could see my desire. They just needed to nurture that and help me where I wasn't going to get hit by a train, if that makes sense. So they were introducing me to the right people. But I will do today what others won't, so I can play tomorrow what others can't. That just meant choice to me. And it's like, I'd like that. I'd want to be able to have that choice of what I can do. So I've always lived my life on those principles of, well, whatever happens, it's how you handle it that makes sense, is the most important thing. Just never give up, and then obviously do what I'm going to do today. So my decision
I love
today
that.
is to put 10% away of my income. My decision today is to go and invest in some stocks or invest in some property or read books. And so probably from 18, 19, all I did, I was often having 2, 3, 4 books. And this is a person that never read a book at school, at high school, primary school, never read a book. And if we had a book report to do, I would read the first chapter, the last chapter, a little bit of the synopsis, and then talk to people and write my book report. That's how I did it, because I hated reading. But what I worked out was that I didn't like reading just storybooks that were just boring. I read, Og Mandino says this really well. He talks about these good books like Zig Ziglar books, etc. He talks to them in the terms of these are hand of God books. And what he means by
Oh,
that is these are the books that feed your mind, feed your soul. And to me, the more you feed your mind, feed your soul, the more success you have. And my business, my group of companies is under, or my financial business and my education business is called Wealth Within.
I
And
love
people go,
that.
why did you call it Wealth Within? And because that's exactly what happens. The
That's
more
where it
wealth I
starts.
have on the inside, the more wealth I have on the outside. You put garbage in, you get garbage out. So people sit there and watch 2 to 6 hours of television a day. And to me, that's junk food. Talking Wealth, which is my latest venture, which is what I interviewed you for, which has been out the name of our podcast for 16 years or more. And we get 120,000 downloads a month. And it's been voted a great podcast around the world and things like that. And that was a super surprise to me. I didn't realize we'd won some awards for that. But to me, Talking Wealth is about empowering people. It's about giving them that, all the things they can do to better their life and make them create more wealth within themselves. And naturally that's going to come on the outside because we become like the 5 closest people to us. So be very
Yes.
careful who you have around you as well. And so I'm super lucky that, and maybe it's by design too, and sometimes it is, that I have some brilliant people around me who give me that unreasonable friendship that just tells me what I need to hear at the time. And it's sort of like a slap on the face. Dale, you're doing this. Wake up, get your ego out of the road. Let's go and do what you need to do. So I'm really blessed with having some great people around, like my wife, Janine, my co-host on Talking Well. I've known her longer than I've known my wife, and I trust her implicitly. And she
That's
always
great.
will call me out if I get an ego or those sorts of, just out of alignment. And we all do that with each other. And I suggest people, family's family, and going where you want to go, your family may not be there supporting you. So get people are. And I grew up in a small town outside of Melbourne in Australia. Melbourne's the big city, 4.5 million people, which is not big by US standards, but it's still big. So I grew up about 35, 40 miles into a smaller country industrial town where Ford made cars and Shell were there, and it was all industrial workers and mills and things like that. But I had to leave because I had, my goal was to be successful. And I thought, I can't be successful when I'm in an environment where people keep holding me back and holding me to their
Sure.
standard. And I needed a higher standard, and I needed to move. So I moved to Sydney. I mean, much more challenging than I could do is just move to Sydney in a foreign land to me. So it's like going from a rural country town in
Big
West
city.
into LA or
Yeah.
New York and going, oh my God,
Mm-hmm.
where am I now? I suggest to me, people is, one of the things my mentor who introduced me to Zig Ziglar said to me, he said, Dale, can you be 1% better today? I went, yeah, I can do that. He goes, how? And I go, blue. And he goes, all right, let's do it. He said, but can you be 1% better tomorrow? And I went, yeah, I can do that. And then the next day be 1% better. And then the next day be 1% better. And then the next day be 1% better. I go, well, that's pretty easy. We can do that. He said, that's what we're going to do. And that's what I'd suggest people do, because people often don't create wealth in their life because they think, I've got this elephant to take over. And you don't.
Yes.
You just need to do 1% things today because in 100 days, you'll be 100% better. So if you don't think you've got money to be put into investing, and let's say you've got $10 at the week that you can maybe put to something, and you just put it away. Keep putting it away. And a lot of the people with the poor mentality think, well, it's only $10, it's not going to amount to much. But it does over time. So from little things, big things grow. So
I
keep
love
planting the
that.
seeds and keep planting the seeds, because the more you do it, the more you'll start seeing. And if you don't touch it, the 3 laws of wealth creation that I talk about in my first book are: spend less than you earn, invest it wisely, and then leave it alone. And they come out of another beautiful book called The Richest Man in Babylon, which is by George S. Clason. Beautiful book. So my 2 favourite books are that one and the Og Mandino book, A Greatest Salesman and All. They're my 2 all-time favourite books. Og Mandino's book got 10 scrolls in it. If people read those, print them up and read them every day, I can guarantee they'll have a lot of success in their life if they
I
follow
have a funny story for you. I don't want to take you too far off track, but
it. No, that's
the
okay.
greatest salesman in the world. So I'm in sales for a living, and it was probably 15 years ago. I had a mentor, a former VP of sales, like saw a lot of potential in me, and he dropped the book on my desk. And you can tell it had been passed around, it had coffee stains on it and all that stuff. And I would just, in between my calls, I would read a paragraph, and I read that thing over and over and over again for, I don't know, 8 months. And then all of a sudden, like my mindset totally shifted. And I don't know if I can contribute everything to it, but I can't say that I can't either, because from that point on, I've been a top performer. Like I just am. It's in my DNA. And one of the things that I took away from that book, and then I'll let you continue, is he talks about the sandals, right? Like going to a foreign country, or 2 men are given, businessman comes and sees that nobody has sandals and approaches 2 people and says, hey, I have this opportunity for you. And one gentleman's like, this is not a good opportunity. No one here wears sandals. And then the other gentleman's like, this is a fantastic opportunity. Nobody here wears sandals. So that goes to like the mindset that you're talking about.
It is. It absolutely is. I mean, what would we do without Steve Jobs taking on the opportunities? He didn't necessarily invent the iPod or the iPhone or anything else. He just saw the opportunity of what could be, and then
Yes.
put the passion behind it and the drive behind it. So he didn't have a degree. Bill Gates doesn't have a degree. Richard Branson doesn't have a degree. They're all people. I think out of the top 10 CEOs in the world that people would write down, I think 7 of them never had a degree.
Oh, wow. I
Some of
didn't
those
know that.
people are dyslexic too. I think Richard Branson's dyslexic as well. So never let where you come from determine where you're going. And to me, the human brain's designed to not think. And what I mean by that is when we're speaking to each other, we're sort of in our conscious mind, if that makes sense. So if we're doing a task, we're in our conscious mind, but your conscious mind tires out really, really fast. So things we do repetitively, our subconscious takes over. So when we drive, we're driving, not thinking. We do brush our hair, we're not thinking. But people, when they're challenged with things, it's then, oh, I have to think now. So then they take the easy road. Whereas those people that are successful go, okay, what is this? And then they'll take that on. And also in having to think, you take you out of your comfort zone. And when you go out of your
Sure.
comfort zone, it is uncomfortable at times. And I find successful people live out of their comfort zone quite regularly, because you've got to keep challenging yourself out of that rather than stay in it, because the average person will sit at home and come home from work, go and watch TV, then get up in the morning and do the same thing over and over and over again until they're in their 60s, and then they retire, and then they die about 3 or 5 years later. Whereas people
Oh
say to
my
me, when are you going to
gosh.
retire,
Yes.
Dale? And I said, well, probably when they put the lid on the coffin. That's probably when it's going to happen. Because I've got to make a difference. Whilst I've got freedom of choice, I can do what I want to do whenever I want to do it. And I retired for the first time when I was 39, but then I was just bored, like, got to do something. So to me, investing can be scary to a lot of people. Trying to grow wealth can be scary to a lot of people. People might find the stock market scary or the property market scary, but fear is collapse when you have knowledge. So knowledge is the enemy of fear. The more knowledge you have, the more the fear gets collapsed. So all I would suggest people do is start to learn, because the stock market is a safe place to have your money, and it's a great place to build wealth. So is property. So are other areas, but the more wealth you create on the inside, the more wealth you'll have on the outside. That'll be whether that's human connection, family, friends, whether it's helping communities, or whether it's physical money or success in business. Whatever that is to you
I
is what
love
will
that
happen when you
statement.
create more wealth on the inside. So the more you put in, and that's why for the first from 18 to sort of 30, And I still have 3 or 4 books everywhere, and the most successful people do. Do I read them every day? No. But I'll pick one up and I'll walk past one and I'll go, I need to read that today. And it's your intuition telling you need that little bit, or you need to revisit that little bit. So I'll pick up, like the Ogmandino book. I picked that up last year at some stage. I saw it, I picked it up, and then I did a podcast series on all the 10 scrolls and what it meant to me in my
I'll
Talking
have to
Wealth
go
podcast.
back and listen to those ones.
So it was like, how did I take all that and how did it mean to me and how did I use that in my life and how might other people use that? But again, you can't put positive in and not get positive out. It's just not possible. And
I love
so
that.
to me is do 1% better. Can you save $1 today? Can you save $10 today? Can you save $100? And keep challenging yourself. And once you get a little bit of money, my books talk about that. When you get a little bit of money, then what do you do with it? And start building it up. And whether it's just in a bank account or whether it's in a deposit with the bank, with a slightly higher interest rate, or whether you start buying stock, anybody can do this. Whether they're 8 or 80, they can do this and start building up wealth for themselves, create businesses, online businesses. There's so many things you can do. But again, you have to start, and you have to start today, because to me, there are 3 things you can do from today. If something's resonated with any of your podcasts, because you've got some wonderful people on your podcast, if you got something from any podcast, then there's 3 choices: do something, do nothing, or procrastinate. And the most people do nothing or procrastinate, and it's the same result. It guarantees failure. Whereas if something's there and you picked it up and you go, that sounds really good, I'd like to do that, then you need to commit to doing it today and being that 1%.
I love that.
And that's really what I grew from.
Well, I was just going to say, like 30 minutes, we're at 30 minutes. It's flown by. I have to have you come back on because there's so much more to still talk about. But you have shared so much wisdom and so many even like one-liners and two-liners that people can take with them. But if you could summarize one empowering statement that someone could get from having a wealth within mindset, what would it be?
I think to me, it's the 1% is probably the most powerful thing. Whilst we can read, I will do today what others won't, so I can play tomorrow where others can't. To me, it's like put on, and this is set goals. And this is all about setting goals to me. And that's what my mentor said to me. So I would always write goals down, stick them on the mirror when I'm shaving, brushing my hair. And I might not read them, or I might pick them up and fold them in the drawer of in the bathroom or something, or in my desk drawer. And so I'd write them down and then, okay. So basically it's about being intentional. And that's really because a lot of people live life unintentionally, or they live other people's lives, if that makes sense, their boss's life or somebody directly.
Yes.
But it's
100%.
about living life with intention. What is your intention? And so setting your goals down will do that. But putting them on the mirror, so when you brush your hair, brush your teeth, whatever you do in front of the mirror, do TikTok videos, whatever they are, they'll still be there, but it's being that 1% better. So, okay, so how can I be 1% better today? So I get all of that. So, but share that with your significant other, whoever that is, or your best friend, and say, this is what I'm going to do, because you have to do that, because that then makes you accountable for that. But again, as I said, to me, it's always about, well, how do I continually improve myself? And the more I improve myself, the more things happen on the outer world.
That's so great. And so listeners, take that as a challenge. Can you be 1% better today, 1% better tomorrow, and see if you can take that string for weeks even. But go ahead and take the challenge. Take the 1% challenge. So, Dale, it was absolutely amazing having you on the podcast. Thank you so much for being a guest. And I'd love to give you the opportunity to share with the listeners how they can stay in touch with you, find you, learn from you, etc. So the floor is yours.
Well, they can, easy to me to find. I mean, I'm on LinkedIn, but talkingwealth.com is where I interviewed you for. So we got hundreds of videos of awesome people like yourself. And my podcast, Talking Wealth Podcast, is on iTunes, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, so people can listen on that as well. So if they just type in Talking Wealth, it'll come up, or talkingwealth.com, it'll come up. And again, they can reach out to me via LinkedIn. They can connect with me via LinkedIn if they like, and I can answer some questions and help them out.
That's awesome. We'll put it in the show notes too. But let's go ahead and close out the episode. Thank you so much, Dale, for coming on.
My pleasure. It's been a pleasure chatting with you today.